COVID-19 pandemia in Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. This is part 4 of my study in Matthew chapter 24 KJV, a study that began in Matthew chapter 24 verse 6 and 7 and concludes tonight in verse 12. If Matthew chapter 24 verse 10 and 11 were to be referring to the internet and the social distancing it creates through a voluntary social distancing by which one decides by its own free will to social distance from physical relating as that of the natural to that of the unnatural of the internet, then verse 12 could still be that same social distancing through the internet. But there is also something else in verse 12. Some social distancing that is not voluntary, but by some change in the person, as if the social distancing has become a manner involuntary of how someone must present itself. The church that social distances itself from physical relating to then seek some other social relating where people are complete strangers to themselves is a church that social distanced itself long time before COVID, becoming a worldly church of the masses that must be entertained through internet socials in order to have them as your church followers, where everyone uses avatars to mask themselves long before it had to physically social distance itself by law because of the COVID pandemic. I believe that this is no coincidence. From one state of condition by which it, by its own choosing, social distanced itself, finding some other way of preaching more comfortable and practical without no fatigue whatsoever, finding followers by the thousands by simply using a keyboard while eating a pizza and drinking a Diet Coke. But then what church is this? And who are your followers? Do you know them? Do they know you? Does anyone care at least to know the other? Where is the harvest? And who are the firstfruits, if there are any firstfruits in such a manner of preaching the word of the Lord? In my understanding, verse 12 could also be COVID-19, and not just the internet, because of two words present in that verse, wax and cold. And this brings us to the meaning of wax and cold in Matthew chapter 24 verse 12, that, like I said before, could be the internet, where physical relating is not possible, and therefore people have become wax cold in relating to each other in an unnatural manner, which is the internet, and unaffectionately visible as when one chats or responds through comments. Verse 12, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But it could also refer to some other social distancing present in the time when the internet has already created its own social distancing, worsening an unnatural psychological behavior already present, social distancing even more, and this time a social distancing from physical contact and relating in a natural way, if wished, and when not on the internet. From that of the voluntary social distancing of the internet to another condition of social distancing that is involuntary and not that of free will, that completes that social distancing with even a physical relating. To me, this is no coincidence. Would God be punishing his priests through COVID because of their choosing to social distance themselves from real life for the illusion that the internet could evangelize much more than a house-to-house, person-to-person preaching? Would the internet looked upon by God as idol worship of his priests, rather than go house to house evangelizing as Jesus taught his apostles to do? Would the internet and its means and method of obtaining knowledge, even Bible knowledge, be idol worship in today's modern and technological present time? Today we laugh at our ancestors in history books that prayed to lifeless statues, or when in the preachings of their unknown gods made their rituals with such statues present. But if you look at it as I look at it, in this present time, we have not changed at all from our ancestors, and neither progressed, because we too use something that, if our ancestors were alive today, would confuse with idol worship, in seeing us stare ours and ours into a screen that our ancestors would believe as a door to our gods, as their statues were doors to their gods, and the tool to communicate to our gods, the computer. They, our ancestors, believe as our idol of worship. Matthew chapter 24 verse 12, KJV. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Verse 12, the internet or COVID-19, or maybe both. Where is the internet or COVID in Matthew chapter 24 verse 12? It is in the meaning of two words in verse 12 from the King James Bible Dictionary, wax and cold. The following is from the King James Bible Dictionary. King James Bible Dictionary, meaning of cold. Frigid, wanting passion, zeal, ardor. Indifferent, unconcerned, not animated, or easily excited into action, as a cold spectator, a cold Christian, a cold lover, or friend, a cold temper. Neither cold nor hot, not moving, unaffecting, not animated, not able to excite feeling, spiritless, as a cold discourse, a cold jest. Reserved, coy, not affectionate, cordial, or friendly, indicating indifference, as a cold look, a cold return of civilities, a cold reception. Not heated by sensual desire, not hasty, not violent, not affecting the scent strongly, not having the scent strongly affected. All these meanings from the King James Bible Dictionary add up to two words: social distancing. Among the guidelines that we follow are that of distancing 6 feet from one another, even in our homes, if there are suspected cases of COVID positive, among others, living in the same house and under the same roof. Imagine what something like this is causing on the psychological negative effects in behavior and in socializing. Everyone could be a suspected case of COVID, a wife or husband, their children, friends, employees at work, the man and woman that one dates. life becomes isolation from the world, and not even our home is safe. Everyone is cut off because the fear of getting COVID is life-threatening. It would be a constant state of fear and suspicion of others. Curious that among the meaning of code in the King James Bible Dictionary has COVID as symptoms, not affecting the scent strongly, not having the scent strongly affected. This is a very common symptom of COVID. Another curiosity among the meanings of code, from the King James Bible Dictionary is easily excited into action. People losing control of themselves become both physically and emotionally excited, because from both the social distancing that the internet creates and the social distancing that the COVID creates, unable to adapt to these new conditions of life, not wanting to adapt, expressing their anger and refusal through violence, or having become violent and aggressive because of unnatural new conditions that have arisen from both the social distancing of the internet and the COVID pandemic, or even relating through facial masks by which facial expressions of our emotions are waxed cold through a mask that covers most of our face. In such conditions, one is frigid, wanting passion, zero to ardor, indifferent, unconcerned, not animated, or easily excited into action. As a cold spectator, a cold Christian, a cold lover, or friend, a cold temper. But there is also something else in verse 12. Facial masks. Verse 12, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Facial masks hide emotions and make a person appear emotionless. Because facial masks, facial expressions, such as joy, happiness, sorrow, anger, cannot be visibly seen by a mask that covers your face, leaving only your eyes to be seen. For some, this condition by which one cannot fully express themselves could cause everything from aggressive response in words to that of aggressive action and behavior. Verse 12, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. What is that wax in verse 12? The following is from the King James Bible Dictionary meaning of wax. A thick, viscid, tenacious substance collected by bees or excreted from their bodies and employed in the construction of their cells, usually called beeswax. Its native color is yellow, but it is bleached for candles. A thick, tenacious substance is excreted in the ear. I would exclude the first two, but notice the third definition. A substance secreted by some plants, forming a silvery powder on the leaves and fruit, as in the wax palm and wax myrtle. If I'm not wrong, some of these components are of facial masks, because facial masks are also made by natural or also made from natural organic compounds. I would exclude this definition, a substance found on the hinder legs of bees, which is supposed to be their food. But the next one is very interesting. A substance used in sealing letters called sealing wax or Spanish wax. This is a composition of gum, lacquer, resin colored with some pigment. Sealing letters or sealing of some kind over the face. The ingredients of gum, lacquer, and resin colored with some pigment are found in facial masks. The next one I would exclude: a thick substance used by shoemakers for rubbing their thread. And finally, another two meanings which are interesting: to increase in size, to grow, to become larger, as the waxing and the waning moon. In my profession as a paramedic under the COVID pandemic, facial masks are not enough when in direct contact with patients with COVID. If with facial masks, by covering the face, leaving only the eyes exposed, wearing a visor, and a body completely covered by clothing gear that covers everything, not even the hands exposed, then all remaining emotions that could still in some form be manifested are completely covered, to the point that for the viewer, in this case a patient, you have completely disappeared behind your clothing and from his eyes, that you are no longer even recognizable or even a pure human. For the patient to see someone assisting him dressed in a way so that not even a finger or an eyelid is exposed would already be unsettling, to say the least. Faces disappear behind the facial masks without adding a total body covering through protective gear. I, for example, have a hard time recognizing even my colleagues. A facial mask alone makes even the voice change, and even male and female are not easily recognizable under all that protective gear. Today we see a lot of this. We see this everywhere, in every hospital, everywhere in the world, these extreme precautions of protection in order not to be infected and infect, which are practical for nurses and doctors and hospital staff, but for the patient, a burden for the patient because of unidentified faces and persons. We have seen, as the COVID-19 pandemic worsens, facial masks of increased size and thickness, along with the protective clothing gear by which who were once our persons, each with their identity and personality, now present themselves as if all are the same, in an inhuman manner of presenting ourselves, as if everyone is a copy of the other, an unexpressible humanity, motivated by fear. And finally, the last meaning of wax, from the King James Bible Dictionary: to pass from one state to another, to become as to wax strong, to wax warm or cold, to wax feeble, to wax hot, to wax old, to wax worse and worse. This pandemic has been around so far for almost a year. We have passed from one state where we were not wearing facial masks to that of a state where we wear facial masks, and that transition was fast, as if wax cold. From our normal facial behavior, by which expressing facial expressions of emotions are in themselves a form of laughing, are in themselves a form of language, by which give a more meaning to our words spoken. From a warm facial expression of what is visibly seen to that of a cold expression of the facial mask that almost completely hides the face and emotions, making us all unrecognizable and with a cold appearance, wax cold. From one state to another, as with putting on a mask and taking it off, as in to pass from one state to another. Or that of a state where facial expressions are visibly seen when the mask is taken off, to that of facial expressions not seen and giving a wax cold look when the mask is on. And to conclude, now if COVID-19 stopped the cannons on the world battlefields, what will come when after the global vaccination has vaccinated everyone, or almost everyone. What will come is what we see all around. The global economy is in ruins, and then global poverty, and then wars will re-begin. This time more bloodier than before, because poverty and misery has increased, and even the world economic powers are risking poverty. Verse 12 is only 3 verses from verse 15, and by the looks of verse 15, appears as if between verse 12 and verse 15, someone attacked the nation of Israel. In these conditions, it could be very possible that someone will set off World War III. End of part 4 and end of study in Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. Thank you.